do we have enough for a quorum now, Sherry?
I can't see who all is there.
4. Let's see. I think that's a quorum.
Yeah, we have 1.
Yes, it would be, because we only have 5 on our board. Yeah.
All right, good. All right, so then I'll call the meeting to order. And Sherry, maybe you can do the roll call for us.
Alan?
Here.
Tuccini? Must be absent. Baranik?
Good morning. I'm here.
Hi, Rob.
Callie New?
Morning.
And Dennis Smith?
Here.
Okay, so Matt's the only one missing currently.
All right.
Swipe to the
Thanks, Sherry.
right. Okay. All right. Good.
I'm
Thank
looking
you.
for a motion to approve the agenda for today. Dennis, thank you. Looking for a second. Callie, thank you. Any additions, subtractions, changes? No. Okay. All in favor, say yes or raise your hand. Yes. All opposed, same sign. That passes. Next is the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, January 21st. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Callie, looking for a second. Dennis, thank you. Do we have any issues with the minutes? Any additions, changes, edits? Okay, all in favor of accepting the consent agenda? Say yes. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That passes. Next, we have the treasurer's report. Mary?
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to run through a brief summary. I've already provided the write-up for the activity as of January 31st, 2021. As I've mentioned, the revenues, we cannot expect any more revenues until we collect the 25% of summer capture, which won't happen until July. So we're pretty much surviving on the capture that we've had through the month of December. So looking at activity for the month of January, expenditures totaled $15,856. This is all pretty much administrative expenditures. We had about $8,000 that was recorded in the administration fund, and then anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 in each of the DLP, Founders Landing, Customs House, and the U.S. State Bank Fund. That was for max activity from October to December. So for the month of January, we had just net expenditures of $15,856, and all of that rolls into our year-to-date. So as I've mentioned, we've already recognized the capture of revenues, and right now revenues exceed expenditures by $1.875 million. When we roll that into our existing fund balance, we have a fund balance as of January 31st of $6.9 million. There are some reservations to that. We have about $2.1 million reserved for bond-related activities, which are transfers to the city or bond payments. We had that $2.7 million that we're reserving for DLP's eligible expenditures. That has been paid out in the month of February. And that leaves us with $2 million for the rest of fiscal year 21. And the breakout of that is sitting amongst the funds I kind of outlined for in your summary. So you can see how much of a balance each fund has to carry out the rest of its budgeted fiscal year. Pretty quiet month. Any questions?
Any questions for Mary? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Oh, David, I just have one quick question.
Go ahead.
How long do these balances stay, Mary, before we just kind of sweep them away? I mean, like Liberty Way's got 58,000, and in another year, if they're done submitting stuff, do we just take that money back that was allocated?
Well, that 58,000 is going to be set aside for. They've got some other bond obligations we need to reserve for this year,
Okay.
and their expenditures. Typically, anything that's going to be left over after we've met all the obligations, we can refund that back to the local unit once the project is done, similar to what we did with Nestledown.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
And Sherry, in case you didn't notice, Matt has joined us, so we've now got
Okay,
Matt for
great.
the roll
Thank
call.
you.
Okay, so now I'm looking for a motion to accept the treasurer's report. Callie, looking for a second. Dennis, thank you. Any other questions, any other issues? See none. All in favor of accepting the treasurer's report, say yes, yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next, we have public comment, which can be up to 5 minutes per person. Do we have anybody for public comment today?
No public comment.
Okay, great. So close public comment. Announcements from the chair. I have none today. Report from the executive director, Sherry.
This month was much like last month, a lot of communication with some of our partners, obviously with MAC, and a couple of individuals who have reached out to us on an item we're going to be talking a little bit later about, and that is the opportunity to have some funding from Brownfield Authority for some of the phase 1 projects of people who are not involved in a brownfield project of yet. So I had a couple of conversations with that. One, I indicated that the board would have to take a look at that. The second one was addressed to myself and the board. And I think we'll have to have a discussion about how to respond to this request. I forwarded to you this morning the coastlines and people. I didn't realize there was an electronic version, and I wanted to get a hard copy for you. It's this was the outcome of some public meetings from an EPA grant that was written by Megan McConville, if you recall. She came to a couple of our meetings. We had one of her interns working with us, and I also went to her class to talk to her class about brownfields and what they do. But anyway, the report is very interesting. It's got some really unique ideas from the locals who met to talk about what they thought needed to be done with Superior, the environmental issues. So I think you'll enjoy looking at that, and it very well could have some things in there that might be templates for some things that we may find ourselves engaged in at another time. So the only other thing I wanted to mention is that I don't know if Jeff is there. He wanted to be on a little bit later because he had a doctor's appointment. Sean, do you know if Jeff is still there?
Jeff Katzen.
Jeff Katzen.
Oh, no, Jeff Katzen's not here.
Oh, okay, all right. But he is on the agenda and just ask if he could be a little bit later. So when we get to that, we might just scoot on to the next topics and come back to him when he's there.
Yeah, just one quick
That would
thing.
be on.
Jeff Watkins is on the line that's working with Jeff Katzen as well. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I can be available for questions and so forth. But I think, like Sherry indicated, he had said that he had a doctor's appointment, wanted to be present if possible. Push him later in the agenda would be great.
Okay. Anything else?
So
Sherry?
that's pretty much my report.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sherry. Any questions for Sherry? All right. So next we have project updates as usual. Do we have any updates on Saunders Landing, either Mac or Sherry?
I think unless we have Barry in the audience, we might as well just address that when we get to the topic.
Sure.
Other than I think we can all see that they're making progress down there.
Yeah.
I'll just add on one thing. I had communications with Gary, and I think, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a city commission study session tonight about the peer project, or including the peer project.
Yep.
So they're going to be kind of looking at that and all the finances. I'm not sure all what's involved, but that may be coming down the road here soon.
That's tonight, Mac?
I believe so. Yep.
5:15.
What time?
5:15, I think is what I saw. Yeah.
All right, thanks. DLP, General Hospital, any updates there this time?
No, not from me.
Okay. Nothing, Mac?
Nope, we just have the Beacon House consideration.
Right.
Other than that,
Right.
yep, nothing else.
Viridia Liberty Way, anything new that we need to talk about today? Okay.
No.
Patisserie, anything?
Nope, sent him a note, but I haven't heard anything back.
Customs House.
I sent you all a note with a few pictures that had been sent along. The Gregory's were going to be on the road today. They were hoping to have a chance to pop on the line, but they did send along just kind of a little summary, and I forwarded that to you. So you'll find that in your email. She sent it last night. So that's basically it. And again, we have one item pertaining to Customs House indirectly, and that's lower on the agenda.
Right.
I'll also add that I had some communication with David Gregory, sort of clarifying a couple of items as his banks were asking a couple questions. So we just kind of went back and forth on a couple of items. So they're looking to, I think, finalize their financing here soon.
All right, good. And then Upper Peninsula State Bank, other than what's already on the agenda, any updates there?
I'll just
Not I.
provide maybe, and Sean may update. We're continuing our wonderful conversations with MEDC regarding that project, and Sean has stepped up, gone to a higher power there. So we're continuing to press the point for non-environmental eligible activities there.
And have you altered last time I asked you for your sort of gut feel for predictions, any change in trajectory? Everything's like last time we talked about all this in terms of our success likelihood.
Yeah, I'll say, and I can't remember if we had talked about this, but there is an effort underway, that MEDC is seeking input from stakeholders and looking to set a policy for Act 3D1. We've been pressing a point to try and at least get kind of expedited approvals for small projects, things of that nature. So we're hopeful, although not necessarily optimistic, but hopeful that there may be some accommodation for these smaller projects. And if that's the case, we may be able to, press that point for this and other projects as well, smaller projects. So there's some kind of global activity happening at MEDC, and actually I'm involved with Jeff Hawkins and another group of folks there to try and advance some policy discussion.
Thanks. Any other questions for anybody about project updates before we move on? Okay. So now we're on to new business. First is Upper Peninsula State Bank, the work plan, Eagle Act 381 work plan withdrawal. Mac, you want to just introduce this for us?
Yep, I'll be very quick. We've been having lots of fun with the state on this project here. This is for the consideration of environmental eligible activities. Eagle does not have the same sort of random and arbitrary, that's my editorial comment, criteria that pretty much if it's reasonable and necessary, they will approve it. Vapor mitigation has been a difficult problem. One, because of regulatory structure, and two, because the state has taken a very careful approach in reviewing these, that if they're going to use state money, they want to make sure that they meet all of the standards and all the criteria. We did find during their review that the proposed liner that was submitted by Trimedia for the project had not been certified by Eagle. They have a process to go through to certify. I'll call it with a small c. I don't think there's an official process, but they're accepting of those. And so that certification is underway, but won't be happening within the construction time frame. So Trimedia has identified an alternative that was submitted for preliminary review and was approved by Eagle. There's a 60-day time frame for approval of these, and we submitted the original plan on January 11th, excuse me. And in communications with Eagle, rather than to go through a process, because the Act provides them, if they deny it or request additional information, to go through a detailed summary. And so we had a conference call, kind of talked through that a little bit, and all parties kind of agreed that the most effective method was to withdraw the Act 381 work plan to make sure that we have what we need from Trimedia and meeting the needs of Eagle here in the next couple weeks, and then resubmit the Act 381 work plan. It's there's still a target date of mid-March for the installation and construction. So we made that clear that we kind of want this done through, and they agreed to expedite the approvals once the information is available. Because the work plan is a document of the authority, we're requesting ratification of the withdrawal and the resubmittal.
Thanks, Mac. And I noticed that Barry just joined us, and we haven't actually gotten to the motion yet for this first item in new business. So I thought I would, if there's no objection, I would just give Barry a chance if he wanted to give us any project updates, since we just were finishing that. Barry, I don't know if you have any updates you wanted to provide today.
No, I think the main purpose of being on here is to discuss the Gaines Rock Townhouse project. So,
Okay.
and I know, I don't know if the communication's been happening here, but Jeff Hawkins is on, and Jeff Catton will be getting on too. And there's some time constraints here. We were wondering if we could get that item pushed up a little bit here on the agenda, if that's possible. I don't know if they were sending Sherry emails, but I don't know if she's seeing them.
Yes, yeah, we've been in touch on that. That's been directed to the board as well. Might I suggest that we do the ratification motion and second, and then we can move on to whichever direction?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I'm looking for a motion. So I'm returning to what Mac just described to us. We're back to the first item in new business. I'm looking for a motion to ratify the action of the executive director withdraw the Eagle Act 381 work plan for environmental eligible activities for the Upper Peninsula State Bank Marquette branch and authorize resubmittal of the Eagle Act 381 work plan.
So moved.
Dennis, thank you. Looking for a second. Rob, thank you. Any further discussion, questions about this? See none. All in favor, say yes or raise your hand. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Okay, so now I'm not sure which direction we're pushing and who needs to be involved. If Barry and Jeff are ready to talk now, I'm happy to go to that discussion right now. If they're waiting for someone else and want to wait, I'm happy to do that as well.
Well, I know Barry, I think Jeff Katzen indicated that he had to be a little bit later because of a doctor's appointment. So I don't know, maybe I misinterpreted that, but then I saw just an email from him saying 8:30. So I don't know what that meant.
Well, yeah, I think we should just go ahead.
All right. Well, just let me, when we're ready, just let us know. We're happy to accommodate the schedule. So we'll just continue through our agenda and just let us know when we're ready. Right.
Thank you.
Jeff Hawkins, if you want to send back to Jeff Katzen, a note that just to come on now. I was going to say, unless I talk way too long, we probably won't be going till 9:30 or 9:45. So
Okay.
I have a David Stagnick in the waiting room. Would that possibly be him?
Yeah, he's also with Envirologic. I apologize for the bouncing back and forth, but our project manager, Eric Peterson, had a death in the family, and so we're covering, and so we're bouncing between meetings.
Okay.
So he's with Envirologic too.
And just to keep it jumping around, Jeff Katzen is getting on right now, so we can go ahead and start to talk about that item if that's okay with all of you. So
yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, he just had to get in the car to get to his appointment, so he'll be joining us from his car. Okay,
Okay.
all right. So, well, I guess Jeff, you want to start off here?
Sure. Well, appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I know as indicated, a previous application was submitted on this project with anticipated costs associated with eligible activities, particularly associated with due care response activities specific to an exposure pathway mitigation at that location. Time moving forward and getting more familiar with the site and so forth, it's been evident that and as indicated also by Mac previously, the challenges that we're constantly facing with Eagle with respect to vapor mitigation and vapor intrusion costs have creeped a bit, particularly with respect to that aspect of it. But then also on the other side of things with respect to non-environmental activities, geotechnical borings and investigations also identified the fact that we have some challenges there with respect to soil conditions, which are from a geotechnical perspective, that has required a significant change with a need for site preparation costs under non-environmental for geopiers to support specialized foundations. I don't know if Barry, maybe that's something you want to speak to more specifically.
Well, yeah, it's just that essentially the site is identical to the Fairfield site. We had always anticipated or hoped, I should say, that we wouldn't have the foundation issue on the site or the vapor issue because the rock comes closer to the surface. But in the end, when the borings were done, it's the same conditions that the Fairfield had in both terms of vapor and in terms of the mixed fill that was done when the rail yard was created. So it's just, the problem is it's just too soft. So you have some points where there was an original grade that comes in within 4 feet of the surface, and then you have a 16-foot ravine next to it. So it kind of just goes up and down. So the site, it just requires the geopiers. We did explore the possibility of removing all the soil and then starting from scratch. But that cost was ridiculous because the material had to be hauled to the landfill. So, so it wasn't until the borings were actually done that, we could conclude all of this. It was reality. So
I guess similarly too, with going back to the vapor mitigation issue too, it's my understanding that early on in our conversations and approach on this particular project with conversations with Eagle, they were supportive of a vapor mitigation system that based on data that we had available from the adjoining parcel from the Fairfield site. And subsequent to that and conversations, they felt that there needed to be some additional assessment to verify that need was there. And so that's also some additional costs associated with that assessment, which again verified that they require it. So, so that's the ask, I guess, at this point with respect to the Brownfield TIF allocation and for this particular project.
And Mac, we're on 11E, right, on the agenda, and we're talking about amending the Brownfield plan to allow for these extra costs, hoping that the total costs that are already coming in will be low enough that there'll be some money left that could go to these activities. And if that's right, I also have a question of if there isn't enough, then we're in a situation of having to amend the Brownfield plan further, or what happens at that point?
Yeah, and it's an interesting situation here because we have, a Brownfield plan that sets that maximum eligible activity obligation. We have a real big approval from MEDC, from at that time MEGA, but now the Michigan Strategic Fund, which lays out the non-environmental eligible activity costs, and we've been allocating those costs, back and forth a little bit as projects have come on and not come on, changes in the activities. And all that stuff. And that's sort of that, second sheet after the site plan as to where we're at in terms of the budget. right now for the allocated costs. And so this request, kind of comes in, but all of the budget allocation has been made. For a while we had some unallocated public infrastructure cost and ability to move things around. And that's what the original proposal kind of fell under. In this case, there was dollars available under the environmental budget as well. My suggestion for this is to review these, and these are eligible activity costs that are there and would be reimbursable. But at this point, my suggestion is to accept the application, to say that these are eligible activity costs, and that if there are balances based on actual costs, it's probably in 2 years or so that all the costs would be completed, both for the continuation of parcel 3B, Marquette Place, as well, and then the pier. We'd know what the pier final cost is as well. And if there's a balance between that, then these could be submitted. That it'd be based on the actual cost and invoices submitted. There'd be a cost associated, or the cost would be calculated, looked at that, and if there's a balance in our already approvals, we could approve those costs. So that's what I'm kind of suggesting right now, is that you provide some consideration that these are eligible costs if there's a balance that's available. If there isn't a balance available, there's an option to amend the Brownfield plan and to provide for local only capture. I don't think we'll be very successful in going back to the state and asking for some additional dollars. And that's what we're doing with DLP, what we did with DLP twice, once for McClellan Avenue and once for consideration under the Beacon House. I might suggest that, I don't think we want to necessarily commit a future board to that in that action, but I know also that there's some interest in kind of having an idea about that opportunity. But so that's kind of my suggestion, is to approve the application there. So these are eligible costs that at the time of completion, that they're submitted for review and for inclusion in the total maximum eligible activity costs. If there is balance available, they can be paid out based on the revenues from the project. And if not, a consideration could be made for a subsequent Brownfield plan amendment.
And Mac, my specific question is, can you imagine is it at all realistic that by making this approval now, I understand exactly what you're saying, we're approving that these actually fit, and that if there is budget, we intend to use that budget to pay those just like the other costs. If we make that decision today, does it create an argument for some future Brownfield board that they must take further action in order to cover those costs if there isn't money left? Do we create a bind for a future board? Is there any argument that might happen?
And that's why I've kind of included in the motion, in the recommendation, that the action, because the application doesn't give assurance for a future amended Brownfield plan. So, that's stated within the motion. I only play a lawyer on TV, but I think that that provides at least clarity in this conversation. That would be subject to a future action by the Brownfield Authority.
Right. So Mac, just in terms of making motions, I see this recommendation. Is what you're proposing is that we adopt all three of these short paragraphs as the motion, or your second two paragraphs just sort of explanation for what that first paragraph is saying?
My suggestion would be that the whole motion, all three paragraphs, are included in the motion. Yeah.
All right.
I think Jeff had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I apologize. I appreciate it, Sherilyn. I guess my question would be to kind of get a reality check with respect to the potential that there is going to be funding to cover these costs. And I guess my question would be, would there be consideration sooner than later to pursue an amendment to the Brownfield plan to include these changes? you know, like you said, I think Chair Allen kind of indicated is that, you know, if you're working 1-2 years down the road, is, you know, you've got a board right now that's favorable to the project, so to speak, you know, is that, would it be less of a lift to consider doing that now versus later, you know, or is there just, you know, is there just so much excess dollars right now currently in the plan that may swing to be available if certain things don't happen? I guess I'm trying to get a better handle on that.
Yeah, Mac, do we have I know that in addition to not being a lawyer, you're not a sorcerer with a magic ball, but do you have some, I mean, I know we heard about potential for the pier being cheaper, and do we know how much money might realistically be left from all these other parts?
Yeah, the pier is certainly the key factor, and you know, some may be able to speak to that a little more. I don't know about the latest cost estimates, and that really is the only reason for kind of hesitation with respect to that. Is that's kind of the big ticket item. The balance of activities, you know, are pretty well set. You know, for One Marquette Place, except maybe for some potential environmental activities, depending on what their final soil balance might be. But the pier is kind of the wild card issue with respect to that. And so kind of in response to Jeff's, you know, question or comment, if that kind of moves forward and that, you know, price is set, you know, the bond is established, we know what those costs are, we'll have a much better idea about what, and the timing of that as well. There's a little bit of a shortfall right now in terms of dollars if the pier was bonded and under construction. Until, you know, Marquette Place comes on, until the townhouses come on, Fairfield is on now. And so there's a little bit of a shortfall in the early years. So that's kind of the, you know, part of the hesitancy to address that, you know, at this particular point, but also understanding the interest of the development team to say, hey, you know, is this a pipe dream or is it realistic? So, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, because I mean, like you said, the pier project is, I mean, you know, we have to respect that. Obviously, that's a vision for the community, but the costs that we're talking about, we know are reality from the standpoint of, from the developer's perspective and the challenges on that particular site. And I guess I had a quick question too. You mentioned a shortfall a little bit, Mac, but have you kind of looked at things with respect to taxable values and how those things are shaken out on finished projects? Are they coming in higher, lower? Or are we behind or ahead with respect to, you know, how these things are shaken out from a standpoint of generating revenue?
Yeah, those projections are really based on, you know, right now of eligible activities, or excuse me, of projects that have happened. You know, we have to project for, you know, the balance of work on parcel 3B, as well as the townhouses. You know, Fairfield is built out. We know what that is and know what those revenues are. So it really is still projections on that build out that happens, and again, kind of depends on the timing of the pier and those payments, a little bit how that's structured as well. So you know, that those are all kind of factors. I might say that, you know, I don't think we could approve a brownfield plan amendment today, but you know, we can look at what the process is at the city for the pier. I think that they, you know, want to move forward with that, you know, fairly soon. See where that stands, and you know, continue conversations with respect to that.
I was going to ask that, Mac, is I mean, assuming that the board decides today that what you've proposed makes sense, that we're happy with going along with, if there's, you know, remaining budget, we're happy to have this approved. The developers can decide when and if they want to try to amend the brownfield plan, right? I mean, they could say, well, we're not going to wait the 2 years and get the answer before we do it, but they could do it sooner, or they could decide to wait till later. Is that right? I mean, is there some reason that that if people want to go forward with trying to amend the Brownfield plan to take care of this under all scenarios, can they?
Yeah, the Brownfield plan is a document of the authority. And so, certainly if the determination is made today and that may have been implied in the application. But they were outlining what those additional costs were.
Yeah.
We looked at that and said, hey, we don't have any available budget right now within the Brownfield plan. Here's one accommodation. I think if, the developers want to say, we'd like to press forward with an amended Brownfield plan at this point in time, they can certainly make that request, and we can lay that out as to what that would mean and how that would work. I will say that I think the city commission will be hesitant to amend the Brownfield plan until there's a little more clarity on the pier. Sean, you may want to chime in on that, but that may be something that they want to have a little bit of clarity on before they add additional obligations to that. So
I was going to ask.
And Mac, I would just say also for myself, I mean, not speaking for the board, but just as one member of the board, that I have some of that hesitancy too. I'm not saying I'm unwilling. I would look at it with an open mind, but this has a lot of moving parts in it, and including some worries about, are we going to get through the tunnel, so depending on exactly what the size of the different parts are, how quickly they happen, it'd be much easier to approve a Brownfield plan if we had some answers to some of these questions. That isn't to say, like, I'm not saying I'm against it, but I like this idea of this being sort of give us some assurance now, and let's get some more information about how the projects roll out, especially the pier, before we make that final decision on the Brownfield plan. I think makes sense.
Mac, I was going to ask, if this amendment is approved today, does the city commission have to review it and approve it?
no, all within the budgets that are allowed, and this would be within the already approved budget for the Brownfield plan and Act 381 work plan. So this is a administrative amendment, for lack of a better term. It's not an official amendment, but it's an administrative amendment, kind of adjusting allocations or line items within an already approved budget. If the budget is increased to accommodate these costs, if there aren't dollars available, then my interpretation is that requires an amendment to the Brownfield plan and would require city commission approval. So if we go to that next step, it would require city commission approval.
I'll just mention quickly for I'll get to you just 1 second. We will get to an actual motion, and there'll be additional opportunity for everybody to ask questions. But since I've been asking questions myself, if we have any other further clarifying questions that any of the other Brownfield members want to ask, feel free to chime in now. But meanwhile, Jeff Katzen, please go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Jeff Katzen with HRS. Mac, I have a couple questions on your the budget allocation sheet that's in the packet.
Mm-hmm.
Where it says the balance column, have those already been allocated? Like under the site preparation line where it says budget $1,406,000, estimate $1,001,000, balance 404. Does that mean there's still 404 left to be allocated, or does that mean it's been allocated but not spent yet?
Yeah, it's all kind of been allocated by the numbers throughout the bottom. There was an available balance of 547 and then partial to request. So kind of the green highlight is what the balance is right now.
Okay, and then the US 41 infrastructure improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Was that related to Founders Landing, or was that money from our Founders Landing Brownfield plan that was moved to the US 41 infrastructure improvement plan, or how did that fit in?
Yeah, those are water and sewer lines that were required by MDOT that service Founders Landing. So that is infrastructure that directly benefits the eligible property.
Okay. Okay. So at this, our really only or best option is to have you guys approve these costs with the caveat that once dollars are known later, whether they're available, then we could access them. If not, we could access additional local only dollars to cover that difference at the end. Is that the gist of it?
Yep, you could request a amendment to the Brownfield plan to increase the eligible activity budget for local only capture, right?
And that second
Okay,
thing,
and we could,
that second thing would require both Brownfield, that would require the city commission as well, if we got to that
Right.
step.
Right.
Yep. yeah, okay, and when, but this, if you pass this motion the way that you have it, that gets us, we still could get started on developing the site and construction, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And anything that's already been approved doesn't change from our initial Brownfield.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, Jeff? I'm sorry.
Anything that's already been approved in our initial Brownfield application, that still is available, the 100 and whatever thousand.
Yes, yes. Yep, that's allocated within the numbers there, yep.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions for now. Thanks.
Jeff Hawkins, go ahead.
A question for Mac, I guess, when you run the evaluation on budgets, I mean, I know it's a conglomeration of the entire Founders Landing project, so to speak, but do you actually run an analysis that demonstrates the tax increment that's going to be generated from the investment on that parcel 2 will support the eligible costs that are requested, or is it kind of combined? You're taking everything into consideration, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'll share my screen if you want to see the fun numbers there. Can folks see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, could you tell me all the formulas there?
Yeah.
So we've kind of laid that out in terms of what is already obligations under the then I'll blow this up just a little bit for the early years. So we've kind of laid all of these out in terms of what the existing obligations are as well for that, and shown that, you know, at least, and then provided the projections of actual, you know, what we're getting right now, and then the projections for One Marquette Place, Adams, you know, those costs have come on, you know, and done, and then laid out what the future development is, and have, you know, just a shortfall. That's if the bonds are issued, you know, almost immediately, and there's a half of an interest payment that's required this year, within this fiscal year. So there's shortfalls in these couple of years, and then you know, there's balance available over and above obligations. And so then we've taken, you know, Founders still has some developer private eligible activity obligations, and again with the hotel and the townhouse, so those costs are kind of allocated as well for reimbursement, and show a reimbursement of about, you know, six years if this, you know, based on these projections. So we did kind of accommodate what they had, you know, after the cascade is complete and the dollars are available for the redevelopment. It starts, you know, when the shortfall is met, and then on with those numbers. So if that answers your question, Jeff, kind of about how we've tried to calculate this.
Right. So, okay. And is that inclusive of the additions that we just were requesting, or no?
It does not include the additions. Yeah.
Okay. So there'd be further shortfalls, obviously, in that regard. Okay.
Oh, well, actually, it would be an extended payback period for the townhouses. So you could probably come out another year.
Right.
You know, probably 2 years. Here, if you're getting 122, then, you know, a similar amount at that time. You may even get more because other items are paid off. So.
Which implies, based on looking at that an amendment could support that but a little bit longer term payback.
I won't comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, this is Barry. I will comment on that. Well, yeah, and I think, I mean, just the concept of this is that the tax dollars that are being generated by the parcel 2 developments are going to reimburse their expenses. And so it in my mind, it only makes perfect sense to amend the plan if necessary for them to get the money. And the reason we need to know sooner than later is that, you know, HRS is going to sell these townhouses. If if they're going to be reimbursed, they're not going to charge that buyer that cost. But if they're not going to be reimbursed, they're going to have to charge that buyer. So I mean, it's sort of a critical piece of information in the next couple months. So, so it sounds like it'll be hinge upon what happens with the pier. I know there's a meeting tonight. I don't know if new numbers will be, brought up tonight or when there might be bidding on that project. But it seems like we need to get that piece of information and then talk about this amendment. So, but I do see it needing to happen in the short run.
And I'm in no way opposed to any of that. I think it makes perfect sense. And my main point is that if there is a pressing need from your perspective to do it even before all this information comes in, and to argue to both us and the city commission that it needs to be done now, I mean, that's fine. It's, and people will consider it and they'll vote how they vote. But I think it, at least from my perspective so far, I think it's an easy ask that we, approve these as eligible costs, approve the idea that if there's budget, no problem. And that if there's not budget, that these other scenarios are very much still in play. The only question is whether you want to try to pull the trigger sooner or wait till some of this information comes in. And, that's a calculation you guys are going to have to make.
Yeah, well, I think it just comes down to what the pier actually is going to cost. So
right, exactly. That's right.
Yeah. So I think it's in all our interest just to wait and see what that actually is. But depending on what that,
I believe that cost is looking to be between 5.6 million and 6.6 million. We're trying to figure that out right now.
That's a nice range.
That's part of what the work session tonight is about, is, trying to see how we can make the 5.6 million work instead of the 6.6.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I just think this is a work in progress, and we have to let things play through. So,
Dennis, I think you had a question.
Yeah, really kind of two. Number one, if, I guess this goes to Mac, I guess, if at the end there's not money available, and so we have two options or just one option, that we resubmit the plan through us and the city commission, or are there other buckets of money available through the state that might step up and take care of this issue? And listening to what Barry's saying about, do we just want to wait a month till we find out what happens tonight before we approve this, or just go ahead and approve it and then we'll know tonight whether it was a good option or not?
Yeah, I think with respect to the first question, it's unlikely that there's any state resources or other buckets of dollars to help with this. We've had a difficult time in getting some of that, non-environmental eligible activities, which the special foundations would be, and most of the additional costs that are being requested here. So I think it's probably just that is the only option to provide that, would be to amend the Brownfield plan to increase the budget for local tax capture only. I think it would be appropriate to, if the board is so inclined, to approve this motion as it is, and then we can continue conversations about amendment of the Brownfield plan, once we have clarity a little bit about the city's direction. And, again, if it's in the interest of the developers to advance a request for amendment to the plan at this point in time, without knowing whether, all those dollars should be available, then, as David said, that can be discussed, put forward and discussed and considered once there's a little more clarity on the piers. So I think it's appropriate to go ahead with the action as proposed. That means you've stated to the developers that these are eligible activities and would be considered for reimbursement. Secondly, that if there's any dollars that are left over, that they would be reimbursed. And then third, that's kind of outstanding. This doesn't mean that a Brownfield plan will be approved, but that we can continue those conversations and consider a Brownfield plan amendment, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Again, I am going to go to an actual motion here shortly where we can have additional discussion, but do we have any other questions or clarifications? It looks like Jeff Katzen does.
Yeah, I would just say I would agree with Mac that I would at least at this point encourage the motion to be approved, and then we could deal with the Brownfield amendment later on. But we would at least want to know that these costs are eligible at this time.
Anybody else before we move to the motion? And okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to read this whole thing in. I can't make the motion, but I'm going to ask if anyone wants to make this motion. Accept the amended Brownfield Plan application from HRC Founders Landing, LLC, and authorize the proposed eligible activities additional costs to be added to the current Brownfield Plan budget if there is a balance after actual costs for all approved projects are completed and approved. I don't know if that was quite right. Reimbursement would be subject to the review and approval of actual eligible activity costs and available Brownfield tax increment financing revenues from Parcel 2A, subject to the provision of the Development and Reimbursement Agreement. Any action to accept the application and consider utilizing available Brownfield eligible activity allocation at this time does not give assurance of approval of a future amended Brownfield plan. If anybody would like to make either that motion or some alteration of it, I'm open to a motion.
Can you had said HRC, it should be HRS.
HRS,
Yes.
okay, yeah, so let's change that.
HRS Founders Landing.
Yeah. My apologies for my dyslexia. I don't know where my
No
brain
worries.
comes with HRC all the time. But, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
So someone can either say so moved, or they can provide a different motion as they see fit.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion from Dennis. Do we have a second? Rob, thank you. Do we have any further discussion, questions, issues, comments, problems? Anybody? Okay, I'm not seeing any. All right, all in favor of the motion, say yes or raise your hand. Yes. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for calling in and helping us with this.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Nice to see you all.
thanks for moving us up in the schedule as well.
No problem.
And we'll be in touch on the peer, redevelopment and continue those conversations if we need to.
Great. Thanks, Mac. Good to see you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so we've done A and E under 11. So now we're at B, which is the DLP Brownfield Plan Second Amendment, which is the thick part of the packet. Mac, you want to give us an introduction here?
Certainly. Speaking of Brownfield Plan amendments for local only capture, that's exactly what this is. You may recall that we did this for some additional costs that were required under the DLP project for improvements to McClellan Avenue. That was part of the whole infrastructure program that was required by MDOT for the subsequent approval. This is a second amendment that we have discussed before. The opportunity for Beacon House to receive reimbursement for environmental and non-environmental eligible activities for this. Essentially, it increases the budget that would be derived from local only taxes by $150,000 for non-environmental eligible activities and $300,000, for environmental eligible activities and $300,000 for non-environmental eligible activities. So I've kind of tried to outline that in a markup version, make a couple of other clarifications as well. But in essence, this adds $450,000 to the Brownfield Plan, DLP Brownfield Plan for capture and reimbursement for Beacon House expenses. I will say that this is one step in the process. I know that there's lots of conversations about where these funds are derived, but this provides for an increase in that budget And then we'll have to figure out kind of the arrangements for that reimbursement cascade, how that kind of works and operates. But this provides the support for Beacon House for reimbursement for those eligible activities. And with that, I'll shut up and happy to answer any questions.
I have a first question. So our local revolving fund, if I read Mary's budget right, has 310,000 in it. And there are two places that this would allow the money, the 460,000 to come from. One is the hope that that there'll be money from the interest amount, the actual interest payments will be less. And so that'll leave room, and, perhaps even all of it could come from that. But if there's not enough from that, then the revolving fund could cover it. But of course, my question is, if the amount available from the interest is, so small that it would be our entire revolving fund to do this, I assume that we're under no obligation that if we approve this today and interest payments were so small that we would have to use the entire revolving fund to cover it, would we have to at that point? Would we be approving today that we're going to spend out revolving fund as much as it takes, even if it's all of it?
Yeah, just for clarity's sake, I kind of allocated that within the budget of the Brownfield plan to say that the total eligible activity cost is no different, so there's no net impact of finance to the taxing jurisdictions. Right. That if we don't have $450,000 left over in the interest budget, because the payout is so much quicker than what we originally anticipated, that should be the case. That we had almost $12 million included for the local Brownfield fund from this project, that allocation. So we'd go from 12 million to 11,550 in terms of the total that we would capture for that. So we don't have to pay it out. It just is a budget that shrinks either first interest, or the budget for the local Brownfield fund. But I think, as you'll see, and I'd kind of hope to be able to pull that together before the meeting, but we now have $170,000 or so within that plan. But we have beginning fairly soon is DLP allocations, which are going to be pretty significant, because we have a 2.5%. We have 2.5% from Founders Landing, and we have almost, I think, 5% actually from Founders Landing and from Liberty Way. So that fund is going to grow pretty significantly as a cash value pretty soon. But this is kind of the budget exercise of if there's not a balance left over in interest of 450,000, that we can reduce the amount of dollars that would be captured over the whole life of the Brownfield plan for the local Brownfield fund by 450.
Oh, so you're not actually taking money out of the fund and paying it in. It just means that essentially it takes longer. Well, less money might flow into the revolving fund from this project potentially.
Yes.
The worst case scenario.
And a maximum of $450,000.
I understand.
Could we revise your recommendation here to say that the money would come from the DLP contributions to the local Brownfield revolving fund? That way it doesn't look like we're taking it out of the money that's already in the fund, but it would.
Right.
Sure, that's implied, but that certainly could be made explicit. Yep. Yeah, it was meant only for this project, but yeah, certainly that could be clarified. Yep.
From payments.
From the local Brownfield fund allocation under the DLP Brownfield plan.
Or if necessary, from payments to the local. Is it that? Will that work?
Yeah, payments from the DLP Brownfield plan. So just to clarity that it's only just this project.
Now you turn the camera off pretty much.
Okay, got it. Good. So I'm going to read this, and we can, if the motion works, then we can continue the discussion about any other details. Here's how I have it now. This is the motion that I'm looking for, or some alteration of this. Approve the resolution to adopt the DLP Brownfield Plan Second Amendment to provide up to $460,000 in Brownfield eligible activities for the Beacon House development, with a line item adjustment from from interest, or if necessary, from DLP payment to the local Brownfield revolving fund. So if that motion works for somebody, you can make that motion. Rob, do we have a second? Dennis, thanks. Okay. So now we can talk about if anybody has, first of all, any other questions or issues or any other specifics. There's a lot of markup. I'll say sometimes I read every bit of the markup just for little niggly things. I didn't do that this time, so I don't know if anyone else did. And Mac, I assume you've got good second eyes somewhere that look for.
I try, although every time you read a motion, I see that there's a typo in it, so I guess.
Right. I did glance through it. Nothing jumped out at me. You know, I didn't have any questions myself about the specifics. Anybody else? If you want to, we have some time. So, anybody have any questions or comments or issues?
I'll just say that one of the things that took a bit of time for this is we did the cash flow statement in an old format, and now we have to use a state format for it. But I went back and we looked, and I worked a lot with Mary in terms of figuring out the actual revenue stream and actual costs, so that the TIF table, the cash flow table, is updated at least through the actual revenues. There might even be some clarifications there, but so along that line is actual to date. And, as you can tell, it was significantly different. We estimated $170 million of investment. There's over $350 million of investment. And so the dollars available in the payout is much quicker than originally anticipated. So, and
this would go, if we approve this would go to the city commission as well, right?
That is correct. We have to notice that and propose public hearing at the March 22nd.
And is it everyone's understanding, well, at least Sean and Mac, that if both bodies approve this, do we think that this resolves the Beacon House issue? Does it seem like everyone at Beacon House and Hospital believes that this is now handled? There's not some still.
I will say that this sets the budget and allows for these eligible activities to be included and reimbursed from the Brownfield plan. So it provides some comfort to Beacon House that those costs will be reimbursed. How it works through there's probably going to have to be some quick amendments to the development agreements. One, just to set the maximum values, and I will say there has been discussion with DLP for them to front these dollars, which would make life a lot easier for everybody. And that way we could just add it to the eligible activity obligation for DLP. And so they're kind of working through that process. If it has to be advanced by Beacon House, we have to determine the cascade and another development agreement with Beacon House and all that other kind of stuff. So there's some implementation actions which will likely be necessary. But this sets the budget and provides the assurance and allowance for these eligible activities, not dissimilar from the conversation we just had about with HRS, that it provides that kind of assurance.
Hey, Mac, do you have the resolution handy?
I do. Yep.
Yeah, the fifth whereas clause. Does that match what we changed the motion to say?
Let me get back to it here.
I think it does, but this says seek reimbursement from Brownfield TIF revenue.
Yeah, I think that's still okay. It doesn't, that's the broader context for the total budget. Doesn't specify interest or that.
Any other questions or issues before we vote from anybody? Okay, I don't see any. All right, so all in favor, say yes or raise your hand. Yes. All opposed, same sign. All right, that motion passes. 11C is local brownfield revolving policy amendment. Mac?
Yeah, the board approved the local brownfield revolving fund policy back in October of 2018. And one of the stipulations that ran through, and this was, the interpretation of Act 381, because you can only spend local brownfield dollars for eligible activities on eligible property. And in order to be eligible property, it had to have a brownfield plan approved for that property. The legislature went back and recognizing that that was a little bit of a problem for some small projects or some other kinds of things, eliminated that requirement that there has to be a brownfield plan prepared to be able to spend local brownfield fund dollars. For example, so we did that for Clistow. As a matter of fact, we amended the brownfield plan to allow for the local brownfield fund to spend dollars on that. We would have had to prepare a brownfield plan for a separate project that did that. And so what that says is you no longer have to do a brownfield plan, but the property still has to meet one of the conditions for eligible property: contaminated, blighted, functionally obsolete, or historically designated. So there's a determination once we approve an expenditure for that it would meet one of those qualifications. The act also said that kind of some of the early activities, you don't necessarily need that. You don't know whether a site's contaminated until you do the environmental assessment. So you can spend those dollars on the environmental assessment there. So our local brownfield policy, kind of reflected that requirement that you had to do a brownfield plan. So I've kind of marked up that policy to reflect that new legislative change. That's there. So I don't think I made any other kind of substantive changes in the policy except for just the clarifications with respect to that change.
So from my perspective, this looks straightforward. And so if other people agree with that, I guess I'm looking for a motion to adopt the revised Marquette Brownfield Redevelopment Authority local brownfield revolving fund policy. If somebody wants to make that motion, or again, something different. Anybody? Callie, looking for a second. Dennis, good. Any questions or comments or issues or specifics on this from anybody? All right, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. D, OBRF request from Lake Superior for about Lake Superior Press site. Mac?
Yep, I'll be the bad guy on this one. The request was received from Alex at Accelerate UP on behalf of the Jacques. Is that correct? Or,
Yes.
That are looking to purchase Lake Superior Press at 802 Lake Street and requested consideration from the local brownfield fund for due diligence. They had assumed that they would do a phase one. The bank required a phase one. They had assumed to do a phase one and get a clean phase one. From that, they did identify some recognized environmental conditions that necessitates a phase two to sample soil and groundwater in those areas of recognized environmental conditions to see if there was a release. And then if the results show that there's contamination, they need to prepare a BEA and file that with Eagle. While, and as I mentioned, while these anticipated expenditures may have been anticipated, they're pretty common for commercial real estate transactions. And essentially, this is a transfer of an existing operation to continue that operation, to transfer in ownership. Really these kind of costs don't appear to meet the goals of the policy that's there to kind of encourage redevelopments that, include housing or public assets or the community needs, and those sorts of things. I think that if the phase 2 identifies that they have to come back and put in a vapor mitigation system, tear up the floor and put in all sorts of expenditures and do a whole bunch of things that might kill the deal, that may be a consideration. But for me, I'm not inclined, because once we provide funding for these, folks might be coming in for every commercial real estate transaction to fund their environmental due diligence process. Now, that may be possible in a few years when we have $12 million in the fund, or some large amount, but it appears that this is a fairly standard transaction, that there really isn't any environmental response. There's not a project that is going to renew expansion, private investment, or they've mentioned a couple of additional jobs, but not going to be a significant activity. So I'll take the heat for this. I'm recommending that the funding request be denied.
So someone can make a motion in either direction. They can either use Mac's first word of deny or change it to accept the funding request for local Brownfield revolving fund for environmental due diligence for Lake Superior Press property at 802 South Lake Street. So I don't know if anybody wants to make one of those two motions.
I'd make the motion to support what Mac put in, that we deny the request.
Do we have a second? Matt. All right, discussion on this. Callie?
Have we ever paid for due diligence on a property?
No.
We haven't ever. Okay. So what you're saying is we've never paid for due diligence and we don't want to encourage that sort of thing, but in the future, once due diligence is done, if there are eligible expenses, then they can come back, and maybe we would support in that way.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, this is standard commercial real estate transactions, but yeah, if they end up with, my gosh, we've got this big problem where we have to spend $200,000, in order to deal with the vapor mitigation system there, for example, that would probably be about the only thing in this case. But, then that, I think, that would be reasonable to consider. It still may not exactly hit the policy, but would be something that could be considered. So.
And something that would help them hit the policy would be like expanding the business, because they are proposing to renovate a historic building, right? And it does support economic development, one could argue.
I think it could be argued. I mean, I think in this case, they're probably just taking the existing business and, continuing there. We want to, tie a little bit to the jobs, or retention could certainly be an issue, for consideration, by the board as well. So, because that would be an extraordinary cost that might kill the deal.
Other questions or issues from anybody?
Good question.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to deny the funding request, say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We've done E, so now we're to F, DLP bonds, reimbursable expenses. So this is, so we're just looking for a motion to approve this $1,525 to the city of Marquette. Anybody want to? Dennis, looking for a second? Callie, any questions, issues? Mac, anything you need to say about this at all?
No, it's all included within the DLP budget, and it's just expense, ongoing expense. Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, say yes. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Miller Canfield conflict waiver request. Mac, do you need to say anything about this?
I think this is kind of a standard arrangement. This note came into Sherry, and Miller Canfield is representing the folks at Customs House. They're also bond counsel for the city. And Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a fairly narrow, I think that's the only legal services that they provide at this point. There may be some others, but they're primarily bond counsel for the city. There won't be any bond projects, or, there may be a little bit of capital improvement, but the likelihood for a conflict of interest is pretty minimal. In this case, they're not negotiating the development agreement, on both sides or anything of that nature. But it's a disclosure item that Miller Canfield requested of acknowledgement that they represent both the city in one case and situation and Customs House in another.
And it's not even Customs House, right? So it's the credit union that is lending for them. So, I mean, I would actually be a little bit more nervous if it were Customs House itself.
Yeah, you're right.
Because sometimes that can be a technique to actually remove counsel. But in this case, I think it's just the lender.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that looks pretty. Do we need to do anything? I mean, is this just for information? We need to.
You need to sign it.
Yeah,
Oh, so I should. All right. So I guess I'm looking for a motion for to allow the chair to sign this.
So moved.
Rob, thank you. Second it, Matt. Any further discussion? All in favor say yes. Yes. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. And then we have max invoice of $1,290. I think it's just one this time. Looking for a motion to approve that invoice. Callie, looking for a second. Dennis, any discussion, questions? All in favor say yes. Yes. All opposed say no. That passes. See how fast I did that, Mac?
I thought there was going to be a motion for adjournment, actually.
Yeah. And then I have a thing here at the end, Brownfield Redevelopment Authority's ISD legislation. Does that goes with the previous thing? I don't think we have anything to do with
No,
that.
it's just an FYI,
Yeah.
just on the change in the law.
Okay.
I will just say one thing about that, if I can quickly, is that, intermediate school districts, public school districts, K-12 are reimbursed and made whole through the state education fund. And so we can always kind of say that there won't be any impact on school funding on the schools. They'll still get their allocation for all these brownfield projects and the state taxes being captured. That wasn't the case for intermediate school districts. They're not through that formula. And this is pretty significant legislation for us locally. We still are able to capture the ISD taxes, but that the ISDs are made whole at the end of the year once we do the filing and reporting for that and identify how much ISD funding has been captured. The state will write a check to the ISD out of the state education fund to reimburse them for any of the capture for the Brownfield Authority. So we can truly say that there's no impact on education system, either K-12 or ISD. And I think that's kind of it doesn't affect the Brownfield Authority, but I think it really helps out the intermediate school districts and helps us say that, hey, we're not impacting local education.
Great. We still don't have anybody for public comment. Is that right, Sean?
Correct.
Okay, good. So comments from directors. I'll go around the screen. Dennis, anything today?
Nope, thank you.
Callie?
Just really quickly, I believe that my term was a year, and I think that I hit that mark. I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding, but might be something to look into. Happy to continue serving, but just don't want to be sneaking in.
Subversive.
Okay. So I don't know if Sherry, can you look into that to see if?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that is accurate. So Kelly will have to reapply, and hopefully she'll do that. And yeah, her term would have been up on the 1st of February.
Okay. All right, good. Anything else? Okay. Rob?
I feel like I'm up for renewal soon too. Do I need to reapply at the end of my term?
Yes, you are, as a matter of fact.
I'll
The
send
two of
guys
you
out
are.
that form right after this.
Great, thanks.
It's my understanding they doubled our payment now, right? Starting in 21.
That's right.
Thanks, Dennis.
Second term, 2 times 0.
Anything else, Rob?
And I moved to give Callie lifetime appointment to the Brownfield board.
Matt, anything today?
I'm good.
No, okay. All right. So I think we're adjourned. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thanks, David.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Oh, Sherry, are you still there, Sherry?
Yes, I am.
I think I have only 3 things to sign. If I'm the Miller Canfield, the Max invoice, and the city invoice. Is there anything else that you think I have to sign today?
The one resolution, yeah. I'll fill that out and send it to you with
Okay.
the names on it. And then, yes, and the one form needs your signature and Matt's, and I'll connect with Matt to have him sign the minutes as well at that
Okay.
time. So,
Great. So I'll just email these signatures to you then. All right.
yep,
Thanks.
sounds great.